Hi all, welcome to ESI Cloud Trainings. My name is Shalini Nerella. So let's get started with Dell Boomi Atomsphere Basic Training Day 2 session. The agenda plan for today is we'll try to connect to FTP server using Boomi. We'll be using FileZilla server and client in our session. So we'll then do a simple integration. We'll try to fetch XML files from FTP server. We'll then convert them into CSV data and load them into disk. We shall also use few logics like string concat, etc. So we'll be making use of map shape, Boomi Suggest, combined documents, etc. And we'll also set the same file name as in source to the destination file. Okay, so let's get started. So first let's create a folder day 2. Okay. And we'll then have to create a process. So create new component and process, and I'll name this as FTP to disk integration. So earlier we have used no data in our start shape in day 1 session. In today's session we'll use connector in the start shape. So I'll be selecting FTP, and remember action will be only get if it is start shape, and if it is anywhere in the middle of the components you'll be having get and send. Usually asked certification question. Okay, so now we'll try to create the connection. So in order to create the connection, I'll need to know host, port, username, password, etc. Right? So now first I'll install FileZilla server and client in my system. So this is the FileZilla server. Let's say agree, next, install. So the installation is done. Now I'll do few basic settings for this. So we'll have to go to edit, say user. Under user, we have ESI user. So first I'll remove this and I'll add, say, ESI user. And I'll give a password to this. And now we'll have to have a shared folder. So I'll add where my files are present. So I'll go to C, demo files, in folder. Under in folder, I have my files. So we have made this as a shared folder. Now you can click on OK. So this is done. So now our server configuration is done. Now I'll have to install my client. So yes. Okay. So say next. So your FileZilla client is installed. So this is how your FileZilla client looks like. So now you can provide the host. So I'll just say local host here because that is there in my system. The server is in my system. User of what I've created. ESI user, password, and say quick connect. So you can either save passwords. So you see here. So this has been connected. So this is where it is connected and it shows the files here in the FTP server. So now we'll try to connect using Boomi to this FTP server and fetch these files out first. Okay, so go back. Now give this connection details here. So I'll say localhost port 21. Connection modes will have active and passive. So this is what the administrator will tell you what to select. But in our end of the session, we'll be discussing about what active is, what passive is in more detail. And username, password. Also, if you see here SSL options, so you can select SSL options. We have explicit, implicit. You can also use client SSL authorization. So this also depends upon how the server is configured. We'll discuss all this in detail at the end of this session in our presentation slides. Okay. So now save and close. And then have a new operation. So now a remote directory. So what will be a remote directory here? So if you go here, see this. This is a remote directory. So in few cases, it will be selected only till C Boomi demo files, and in folder will not be shared. In that case, you'll be having in here. So this will be a remote directory. Paste. File filter. If you want to fetch all the files, say file filter start. Then you will be having all files fetched. Transfer type, we have binary ASCII. And maximum files to read, same as in disk. So if you say 0, all files will be retrieved, right? And we have something called archiving here. So if you want to archive the data that is coming from FTP, you can just check this. And this is tracking caching. We'll be discussing in detail about this in our later sessions. Okay? So now we have configured our operation, say save and close, right? So now we'll first test this. So whenever you're starting a project, first configure your endpoints. It's important for you to configure your endpoints first. So let's test this. So remember again, because FTP is within the firewall, you need to have a local atom installed in that particular server. So now, as you see, we have 3 files. So you remember what we have done here? We have C demo files in folder. We have shared this in the FTP server. So there are 3 files here, and so we are able to fetch 3 files. And if you see here, if you click on connection data, you'll be able to see account1.xml, account2.xml, account3.xml. Okay. So this gives you the files out, and you can also view the files. So as told, these are the component logs. And when you click on here and see log here, this is called process log. This gives you the complete detail of the process, and these are specific to each component. Right? So now we have files out of FTP, and we'll now try to move the files from FTP to disk. Right? So now my source is configured. Next, I'll have to configure my target. So I'll be using disk connector here. Okay. So now, because I'm sending the data, my action will be send, right? And connection. So connection, you remember we earlier have configured in our day 1 session. So we'll make use of the same disk connection. Okay. And operation. So operation, I'll have to select, I have to create directory if it doesn't exist. So if you check this, if the directory doesn't exist, it will create for you. And this is file naming options. So create unique file name if it exists, overwrite if file exists, append if file exists, append if file exists, error if file exists. So you can check any of these options. So if you have the file name already existing, it will overwrite. If you have the same file name again, it will append the data to it. And if a file exists, it will error the process out. Say save and close. Disk is configured. So now in my disk connection, it was pointing to in a folder, right? So now I want these files in my out folder. So remember this, if I'm modifying this, the other process as well gets affected, because we have copied that from the day 1 folder, right? So I'll create a new connection here, out disk connection. So I have files in, so now you see out folder is empty. So I'll create the connection here. So this is done. Now we'll try to execute this process. Right? So now you see that the process is executed. And now we'll see if our out folder is, so see here, the out folder is populated and we have data in it, right? But if you see here, our source files are account 1, account 2, account 3. And open this. So you see here 1564862. And if you go to out folder, so you see here we have 1564862. So the data is same, but what Boomi does is it gives a random number to the file and it appends .dat extension. So it converts to .dat file and loads it into the out folder. So now you might get a doubt, like if I need to have the same file name that is there in source to be there in my target. In that case, what I'll have to do. So in few cases, you want to set the same file name that is there in source to your destination, right? For that, what are we going to do? So I will use a set property shape here. Use a set property shape here. So you're setting a property to the document that is going into the target, right? So now you'll say properties to set. So I'll have to set the property to the disk file name. Okay. So we are setting the property for the file name for the document that is going into disk, right? And what is the value that it is? That should be the incoming file name, correct? So where are we getting the file from? FTP. So I'll go to here, I'll select document property. I'll go to FTP and say file name, right? So I'm setting the file name for the document that is going into disk, and the value is going to be the file name that is coming from the FTP, right? So give a display name to this, meaningful name, set file name. So this is done. Now let's execute this. So this is done. Now if you go to here, you see here we have account 1, account 2, account 3 as the file names, right? And if you see the data, we are having company 1564862. So same data that is there in folder are moved now to out folder. So this is a simple integration. So now what we'll do, so now this is the data that we are having, right? So this is the XML data. We'll try to convert this into a CSV file and we'll have only 3 fields. So we'll say company ID, company name, and we'll try to concat between first name and last name. We'll say contact name and we'll try to concat string first name plus last name. Okay. So now, so go back and let's remove this for now. So in order to convert from one profile to another profile, I need to use map shift. So I'll use map between. I'll create a new map and I'll name this as XML2 CSV map. So this is done. Now this is how the map component looks like. Here we need to give the source profile. So a profile defines the document, the structure of the document coming in and out of Boomi process. So you need to define this structure here, and this is the destination profile. And we can provide the map functions here. Okay. So first let's go and choose this. So if you see here, the profile types we have database, EDI, flat file, XML, JSON. So this is one of the interview question as well as a certification question. What are the different profile types we have? Database, EDI, flat file, XML, and JSON. So now you'll have to select what your source is. So because my source is XML file, I'll be selecting XML. You can create a new profile. Or if it is already existing, you can select from the list there. So I'll say this as account XML profile. So now you can either import the profile or see here you can create your profile manually. So in real time, the vendor gives you the file structure. So in that case, you can import, or they'll be giving you a mapping sheet which defines the complete structure. In that case, you have to go and create the profile manually. Okay. So for now, I'll import the profile because we have the file. I'll say choose a file. I'll go to C drive, demo files, in folder, account one. So I'll be selecting this. Say next. So now you see here, the structure has been created. Right? So this is what the file is. Right? So the structure as it is will get created when you import the file. So I can delete two of them here. We'll discuss all this in detail later, but I'll tell you what am I doing. So now this is done. And now I'll have to create my target, right? So I'll select choose, and my target is CSV file, which is a flat file profile. Create a new profile. I'll name this as account flat file profile. You see your element. So because we don't have the file already, I'll go and create the file. So add elements. If you have it, you can just click on here record and say import. Right? Now new element. I will name this as company ID, company name, and you can add elements or say add multiple elements. You can select number of fields, how many at the same time. So I'll create one more element and I'll say contact me. Now if you see here, so this is the position that defines 1, 2, 3 based on positions. Say if you want to check this, this will be mandatory check. If you want unique fields to go in, you can say enforce unique. You can give field length validations and data type. Here you can define the data type. Right? Under options, you can say use column headers. So which means the listed fields here will be appearing as column headers. And file type, so you can select the delimited or data positioned. Right? So delimited, where that will be separated with commas, and when you say data position, when you give this field length, start column and length, those will be taken as a data position. Okay. And delimited, so you can provide your own delimiter, whether it is star delimiter, comma delimiter, whatever it is. So I'll say comma delimited. And these are something, the requirements that you have to ask vendor in real time. You need to ask the vendor what kind of delimiter they're expecting in their target file. Okay. And text qualifier escape. So all this you can check with them. So they'll be defining in the mapping sheet that they are giving you usually. Right. So our target profile is configured. And we'll be discussing about profiles in detail in later sessions. So now we need to map this. So we need to map data. So either we can do this manually. If you want to unmap, you can move it back, right? And in real time, you might expect like you have 500 fields. So you can't go manually mapping each field, correct? And you can also have it jumbled up and down. You can't always go and map each field. For that reason, Boomi has come up with something called Boomi Suggest, right? So Boomi Suggest maps all the identical fields for you. So now if you see here, it gives you high confidence, medium confidence. So now you see here, company ID to company ID, company name to company name, and for contact underscore name. So it uses its intelligence to concat first name and last name. So here it has used function string concat. Say next. So now if you click on finish, so it does the mapping for you. Boomi Suggest does the mapping for you. So see your company ID has been mapped to company ID, company name, and contact name. So it had done the string concat. The delimiter, what delimiter you want to use here can be provided here, right? Fixed to length, how many characters you want in the target, you can define them here, right? So this is how it usually does the mapping for you. So now what we have done, we have converted XML file to CSV file. We have used comma delimiter and we have concatenated first name plus last name to contact name. So now we'll save and close this. And we'll try to now execute. So let's delete all the files here first. This is done. So now let's give some other .csv file name, right? So I'll say set file name here and say disk file name, and now I'll use some static value. So see here, you can use all these properties. For now I'll use a static value and say account dot csv. So now execute this. So this is done. Now if you see the target, so see here, the company ID, company name, and contact name are given here, right? So similarly for all the three files. So see here. So by this, we have converted the XML file to CSV file, right? So now we have three different files. So we are getting the data from three different XML files and we are creating three different CSV files. And we wanted company ID, company name, and the contact name, right? So now if you want all the three documents into a single document, what am I going to do? So I'm sorry, I want all the three files into the, three records in a single document. So then what am I going to do? I have to use a data process to combine the data. So after CSV file conversion, right, I need to combine after CSV. So I'll place something called data process. So this data process manipulates the data. So we can select combine documents here. Here, combine documents. So this is used for combining or splitting the document, encrypting, decrypting, zipping, unzipping. So all these manipulations to data can be done through data process share. So I'll say combine documents and profile type flat file because CSV data I'm getting, and see here return first line as column headers or no column. My file has column headers, right? So I'll say retain first line as column headers and say okay. So I'll give a name to this, say combine documents. So this is done. So say if I have something like this, if I go to arrange here, see it automatically arranges the components for you, right? So combine document, I'll now give a file name to this. I'll say account underscore combine dot csv. So now we'll execute this. So see now this has been executed. So you'll see that out of flat file. So here you see shape source data. So this is the FTP data that I'm getting, right? And so after the map, you'll see the data here. See here company, because we have used this select column headers. So we have this as column headers, and down to that you have the value. And similarly here, there are 3 different individual documents. See here and this. So this is done, right? Now I'm having 3 documents. So our goal is that we need to have these 3 documents into a single document, right? All these 3 records in one single document. So we have used combined documents here, and if you click on next shape, you'll be able to see the documents combined. So here you'll set the file name account underscore combine.csv. You'll use the shape source data here. So you see here, so if you see the data here, you'll see company ID, company name, contact name. So all the 3 documents are merged into one single document, right? And this will now go into disk. So this is the data account underscore combined. So you'll see all 3 in one file. So this is clear. So this is about our simple integration done in day 2 session. So we tried connecting to FTP server. We have installed FileZilla server and client in our system first. In real time, the FTP server details will be provided by the vendor to you, and the configuration details will be provided to you, right? So we tried connecting to FTP server and we fetched data out of it. We then moved the files from in folder to out folder in our disk. We then used map shape in order to convert the XML data to CSV data. We then combined all the documents into one single document and provided a name to it. So we also have set the same file name that is there in source to the target. Okay? So this is a simple integration. And now let's go back to our presentation slides. So we have seen FTP connection, FTP to disk integration, map shape we made use of, Boomi Suggest we have seen, and combined documents, and set file name same as in source. So remember in operation we were discussing the modes. So we have seen active mode and passive mode, right? So though this is not important, it is good to know about what active mode is and what passive mode is. Usually the FTP administrators will tell you what mode to use, but it is good to know about this. So in active mode, you'll see that the client connects from a random port, so random unprivileged port, to the FTP server's command port. So here in our case, it is 1026 talking to server command port, that is 21. Then the client starts listening to the n+1, which is like in our case 1026, and other will be 1027 will be the data port. It sends that information to the server. So the server will then connect back to the client specified data port from its local port, which is here port 20. And then the communication goes. So this is how the active mode connects. So in active mode, client specifies connects from the random port and server initiates the connection on where the client is listening, right? So the main problem with the active mode is that it actually falls on the client side. The FTP client doesn't make the actual connection to the data port of the server. Simply tells the server where on which port it is listening, and the server then connects back to the specified port on the client. So from the client side firewall, this appears to be an outside system initiating a connection to the internal client, something which is usually a blocker, which is not accepted. So for that reason, in order to resolve this issue of the server initiating the connection to the client, a different method of FTP connection was developed, which is the passive mode. So in the passive mode, the FTP, the client initiates both connections to the server, solving the problem of firewalls filtering the incoming data port connection to the client from the server. So when opening an FTP connection, the client opens two random ports. In our case, 1026 and 1027. So two random unprivileged ports. The first port contacts the server on port 21 here. But instead of then issuing a port command and allowing the server to connect back to the data port, which is as in active mode, in this case, the client will issue a passive command, PASV command. The result of this is that server then opens a random unprivileged port. So a random unprivileged port it opens and sends that number back to client. So the client will then initiates the connection from the port from its data port to the server, and the connection will then be established. So this is the most used mode in all cases, but here there also can be problems from the server, right? So this is about the connection mode. And when comes to the explicit and implicit, so here you'll have to select explicit mode or implicit mode, the SSL options. So when you select explicit mode, it is like the client connects to the server, right? And client explicitly requests TL by SSL encryption to be switched on. The client talks to the server using this encrypted channel, right? So first client connects to server and it asks to turn on this SSL encryption. So then the secure channel will be established. While as an implicit, the client connects to server and TL by SSL encryption is switched on implicitly as soon as the channel is established. So you don't explicitly have to specify. And as soon as it connects, a secure channel will be established in case of implicit security. Okay. And transfer types. In transfer types, we have seen two types, binary type and ASCII type. So binary type will transfer file as a raw data. So this will be useful for things like .wav, .jpg, jpeg, .gif, etc. And whereas for ASCII, the transfer file as a text, like .txt, .html, .php, etc. So usually the FTP setup is done by default to select binary or ASCII automatically. So explicitly, if it is configured in our FTP connection, whether to select binary or ASCII, in that case, you need to give these values in the operation. Else it takes by default. And Boomi AtomSphere can access any FTP server connected to internet because it is TCP/IP based. And the prerequisites that are required are an FTP user with read-write access should be provided, else you'll be given an error. And the port for FTP communications default is 21. An internet connection for FTP server or locally deployed Atom that is accessible within your network. So as well, FTP server is behind the firewall. So we need to either open the connectivity or we need to have a local Atom installed there. So we were discussing that about a document. We have 5 types. We have seen, right, all 5 types: XML, JSON, flat file, database, and EDI. So this is usually as interview as well as certification portion. Different document types. And there are 4 formats, document formats. So records are usually called in flat file and database. And transactions, XML, EDI, these are called as transaction. File instances for communication between systems not requiring a structural analysis, email attachment, and exporting to disk. So these are called as file instances. And also an empty format, simple triggering for subsequent shapes of the process. So these are the 4 formats. So that's the end of our session, day 2 session. If you have any questions, you can let us know. Thanks a lot.